ever find yourself going back for seconds? Even thirds of a certain dish. Like something's pulling you in, you know? We're about to unpack the science and controversy around MSG so you can like really decode those cravings.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because MSG often gets painted as this like artificial boogeyman.
Yeah.
But it all boils down to harnessing the power of glutamate, something that's already in tons of natural foods.
Okay, so let's break that down. We've got articles here talking about MSG as this combination of sodium and glutamate. So it's not some lab-created thing, but something found naturally in a lot of what we eat already.
Exactly. To get a little technical for a sec, it's the sodium salt of glutamic acid. And glutamic acid is an amino acid, you know, those tiny building blocks of protein. And our bodies are swimming in glutamate. It's not just in food, but also in us, playing a vital role.
So if it's already in things like tomatoes, cheese, why are we even adding MSG to food? What's the point?
See, that's where it gets really fascinating. You know how we have sweet, sour, salty, bitter? Well, there's this fifth taste, umami. It's that savory, brothy, almost meaty deliciousness that makes some foods so satisfying. And, here's the kicker, foods naturally rich in glutamate. They tend to be umami powerhouses.
Like a ripe tomato bursting with flavor, or, oh, a sprinkle of Parmesan that just makes everything better. Those are packed with naturally occurring glutamate already hitting those umami notes.
Precisely. And MSG essentially amplifies that savory taste by directly adding more glutamate. Think of it like turning up the volume on an already catchy song.
Okay, but then this is where the controversy comes in, right?
Yeah.
Because if it's just about enhancing a natural flavor, why all the fuss?
You've hit on a crucial point. It's not just about the, science of taste. It's about perception, cultural context, all of that. But before we dive into that, let's address something you've probably heard of. Chinese restaurant syndrome.
Right, because that's the thing that always comes up in conversations about MSG headaches, flushing, those sorts of reactions. But is there any truth to it, or is it just a myth?
That term itself, while, widely recognized, is actually outdated and potentially misleading. It's important to acknowledge that some people do report experiencing short-term reactions after consuming MSG, things like headaches, flushing, sweating, and their experiences are valid.
But to blame an entire cuisine based on anecdotal evidence just doesn't seem right.
Exactly. It's about individual sensitivities, not sweeping generalizations. It's also important to note that these reactions are typically mild and temporary, and not everyone experiences them. In fact, major health organizations like the FDA, the World Health Organization, they still classify MSG as safe for the vast majority of people.
So it's kind of like how some people are lactose intolerant, right? Doesn't mean dairy is inherently bad for everyone.
That's a great analogy. It highlights the importance of listening to your body, understanding that we all react to food differently.
Which makes me think about, all the choices we make when it comes to food, right? If someone wanted to avoid MSG, is it even easy to spot on a label? Or are there, hidden landmines?
Yeah, that's the tricky part. It's not always as straightforward as, MSG in big, bold letters. Food manufacturers, they use a bunch of different names for ingredients that contain MSG, or even just free glutamate.
Oh yeah, I've seen that, like hydrolyzed protein or yeast extract. Sometimes even natural flavorings can be a bit of a mystery basket.
Exactly. So if you're really serious about avoiding MSG, it takes a little detective work. You gotta check those labels carefully.
So knowledge is power when it comes to navigating those ingredient lists. What about just, sticking to fresh whole foods? That seems like a pretty safe bet.
Oh, absolutely. Choosing fresh whole foods whenever possible, that's always a good strategy for a healthier diet overall. And cooking at home more gives you, ultimate control over what goes in your food.
Makes sense. You know what's interesting, though? We've talked a lot about the short-term reactions some people get, but what about long-term effects? Have there been any studies looking at that?
That's a really important question. And to be totally transparent, research on the long-term effects of MSG in humans, it's still limited. There have been some studies, mainly on animals, that suggest there might be issues at super high doses.
High doses, like way more than you'd ever eat in a normal diet.
Exactly. We're talking amounts way beyond what's considered typical human consumption. And even then, the findings, they've been mixed. It's crucial to, approach these studies with a critical eye, remembering that, extrapolating animal data to humans, it's not a perfect science.
So more research is needed to really get a clear picture.
Absolutely. And it's so important to remember correlation doesn't equal causation. Just because a study finds a link between, say, high doses of MSG in rats and some health outcome, it doesn't mean the same applies to humans eating normal amounts. It's about the whole picture.
That makes sense. Seems like there's still a lot of unknowns when it comes to those long-term effects.
There are, but it's crucial to focus on what we do know. MSG is considered safe for most people by major health organizations. Some individuals might experience those short-term reactions, and a balanced approach to your diet, listening to your body, that's key.
It's that awareness piece, right? Being informed and making choices that feel right for you. Speaking of which, I'm curious about the cultural context around MSG. It seems like it's a staple in a lot of Asian cuisines, but often viewed with suspicion in Western cultures. What's your take on that?
You've hit on a really, really important point. The way MSG is perceived, how it's used, it varies so much across cultures. In many Asian cultures, it's just another ingredient, a way to boost the natural umami of a dish, much like we'd use salt or pepper. But in the West, it's often been, kind of demonized, linked to this idea of Chinese restaurant syndrome, which, as we discussed, carries some unfortunate baggage.
It's a good reminder that food isn't just about taste. It's all intertwined with culture, history, perception.
Yeah.
All these fascinating threads woven together.
Precisely. And it's on us to be mindful of those nuances, those complexities when we talk about something like MSG, to have conversations that are both informed and, respectful of different cultural perspectives.
It's like, everything in moderation, right? As long as you're informed and making choices that feel right for your body.
I like that. It's about finding that balance between enjoying delicious food and making choices that, make you feel good.
Well said. So there you have it, listeners, your MSG deep dive. We've gone from these tiny glutamate molecules all the way to the cultural side of flavor and everything in between.
We've explored the science, right? The myths, the nuances of this ingredient that people, I think, really misunderstand. And remember, the most important ingredient in any diet is informed choice. Listen to your body, explore, enjoy the delicious world of flavor.
And on that note, we'll leave you with this. If MSG is considered safe by, major health organizations, why does it still have this, stigma in some parts of the world? Food for thought as you head out on your next culinary adventure.